Good evening, everyone. Before we start, I'll read the etiquette and introduction note. May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute yourselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. If you wish to speak, can you please raise your hand in person if you're sat in the chamber, or use the remote raise hand function. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to speak by the chair, please turn your camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address by the chair, please could you ensure that your microphone and camera is on to ensure you can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of the chair and/or democratic officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and/or to grab the attention of the chair or democratic officer. If you have difficulty hearing or being heard when addressing the committee, then please let me or the democratic officer know. So we'll move straight to agenda item 1. Any apologies for absence?
None received through to myself, Chair.
Thank you very much. If there are no others, agenda item 2. Agenda item 2, minutes of the meeting held on 11th of January 2024. If there are any comments about that. Okay, if I move the minutes, if I could have a seconder.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor John. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest and the nature of such interests under the Council's Code of Conduct. Councillor Payne.
Hi, sorry, can I couldn't press my thing. Can I give apologies firstly for Councillor Elliott Penn?
Yeah.
And also, can I make a declaration under item 5, please? Yeah, item 5, yeah, sorry. It's the care and support. Slamai is mentioned on page 18. It is my employer. It's personal but not prejudicial.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hennessy.
Yeah, just to check with Amy, do I need to declare telecare because it comes under part of that?
Sorry, Councillor, can you confirm the report, please, and what the context
Sorry,
is?
number 5, corporate strategy. It covers care and support.
One moment.
I did yesterday.
So the strategy for children, is that what you're referring to? That's 5.
No, okay.
No, you're retracting that, Councillor, is it? Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, everyone. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to agenda item 4, Children and Young People Services Annual Placements Review. So it's over to Karen Conway.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening all. Some of you may be very familiar with the Annual Placements Review. It is a yearly report that is presented to Scrutiny, and it is in relation to placement provision for children looked after in the Vale of Glamorgan. If you're happy, Chair, I'll just give a brief summary of the report and then open up things for questions. Yeah. Okay, pages 1 to 3 of the Annual Placements Report describes how this area of activity and expenditure is challenging and complex, and how there are a number of external influences which impact this area. These include children with complex needs, When I'm Ready scheme, remand placements, COVID-19 and the cost of living crisis, and the Home Office's National Transfer Scheme. Pages 3 to 5 describes the aims and objectives of the corporate strategy for children in need of care and support, which underpins our work with children and families. Pages 5 and 6 provides information in relation to the number of children looked after and where they are placed. We can see from the report that the population increased from March 22 to September 23 by 54. And the greatest increase is in friends and family foster care, also known as kinship. We can also see increases in our use of independent fostering agency. Page 7 shows children looked after data from our neighbouring local authorities for comparison. Page 8 looks at our external placements budget, and during 22-23 this budget was overspent by 228,764. Pages 8 to 12 looks at some of the initiatives and activities undertaken during the year, including the external placement audit, looking at suitability of placements and where we can identify alternatives. Our internal foster care recruitment strategy, looking at how we can increase the number of our own foster carers. The development of the local residential provision for children in partnership with our third sector partners, Llamau and Action for Children, to open 2 new residential homes, one of which is already open and the second is awaiting registration. The joint budget for children requiring residential care and education, and the Children Reduction Project Board, where we safely identify children who no longer need to be looked after and we look to discharge their care orders. Without these work streams, our children looked after population would be much higher. And finally, page 13 looks at the opportunities and activities underway this year to manage this area of activity. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Karen. So over to councillors for any questions or comments. Councillor Payne. Oh, Councillor. There you go.
Sorry, my hand was up previously, but I did want to ask a question. Thank you, Karen. So I'm interested in the impact on your services in terms of children maybe with more, are we getting more children through with more complex needs since the pandemic? Is that something?
Yes, I think that's something common, councillor, to us and our colleagues in education in terms of the complexity of children and the complexity of their needs now is what we're seeing is far greater. There's more, it's sort of enduring emotional well-being issues and mental health issues that we're dealing with young people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Lynch-Wilson.
Not a question as such. I had an opportunity in December to meet some of the fostering team because they had a Christmas party at the community centre I help run, and it was very interesting, the comments and the dedication that they had. So I just wanted to say well done to everybody.
Thank you, councillor. That's very much appreciated. And just echo really your comments in terms of our foster carers do an amazing job, and we're working really hard in order to try and recruit more foster carers in the Vale of Glamorgan. And I'm hoping that you've seen recently we've been pushing out quite a bit on our social media pages and the need to recruit more foster carers in the Vale of Glamorgan.
Thank you. Councillor Emma Goodjohn.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, when a family or a child are discharged, are they then seen as at the edge of care? Are the children monitored for any help that they might need after being discharged? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, councillor. So when we're looking to discharge a care order, we have to take that back to the court because only the court can discharge the care order in relation to that child. And usually what happens in order for us to satisfy the court is what we produce a care and support plan then going forward for that child and that family. So usually in most cases, we keep that case open for at least 6 months on a care and support basis to ensure that there are no issues going forward following the discharge of the care order.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that, Karen.
Thank you. Helen, just checking if that's another question or a legacy hand. Thank you. Councillor Godfrey.
Just checking if you can hear me now. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, Russell.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a question, Karen. On page 7, it mentions the increase in the number of children placed in externally provided foster care since March 22, and there's obviously been a significant increase since that point. I know it's obviously a target for reduction. Do you have any projections on when you think that number might start to come down?
If I'm honest with you, Councillor, it's really difficult to project that. Certainly over the last 3 years, our reliance and our need to use independent fostering agencies has increased. There is a huge shortage nationally of foster carers, and I'm hoping some of you may have seen a campaign recently by Foster Wales. That's a Welsh Government initiative across all of Wales. So all the 22 local authorities are working together now in relation to marketing in particular and recruitment of foster carers. Many of you will know Welsh Government initiative in terms of preventing profit within children's care. And so that's a Welsh Government agenda. And so we are hoping over the next couple of years, while that agenda is embedded nationally, that more foster carers from independent fostering agencies will come across to local authorities. But I think that's going to take some time. I think that's going to take a number of years. And, you know, we've just got to work hard at trying to push the recruitment of foster carers across the whole council as much as we possibly can.
Great. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from councillors? No, nothing I can see. So thank you, everyone. So I move that we note the report, the Vale of Glamorgan Council Children and Young People Services Annual Placement Review report, and also that we get a further report at the October 24 meeting. If I could have a seconder for that.
Yeah, happy to second.
Councillor Hennessy, thank you very much. Thank you, Karen. Moving on to agenda item 5, proposed corporate strategy for children who need care and support 24 to 28. So that's Liz Jones and Martine. Hi, Liz.
Hi, it is Martine that is presenting tonight.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, good. Can you hear us, Martine? Yeah. Okay, well, might be having a tech issue, so we'll move on to the next agenda item in the meantime. Agenda item number 6, the Annual Equality Monitoring Report 22 to 23, Tom Bowering and Rob Jones. Hi, Rob.
Yeah. Hi, thank you, Chair. So this first report is the Annual Equalities Monitoring Report for 2022 to 23. The Equality Act includes a public sector equality duty, and there are a number of specific duties for Wales as well. These include the requirement to publish an annual equality report by the 31st of March each year, detailing progress made in the previous year on equalities issues contained within the Council's Strategic Equality Plan. That's what this report is designed to discharge, and the Annual Equality Monitoring Report is structured specifically so to meet the requirements of the Equality Act and the specific duties for Wales. The report covers a number of things. It picks up background information around the purpose of the report, the steps the council has taken to identify and collect the relevant information to produce it, how this information is used in meeting the general duty. It provides a statement of effectiveness on the council's arrangements for identifying and collecting relevant information. It details the council's progress towards fulfilling each of its existing equalities objectives. That's the bulk of the report, setting out what's been done, what's been learned, where some of the challenges lie. It then covers a statement of the effectiveness of the steps that the council has taken to fulfil each of those objectives, and then some specific employment information as required by the Act. All of the detail is in Appendix A, which is the full annual equalities monitoring report. As I said, the bulk of it concerns the council's progress towards meeting its 10 equalities objectives in the year 2022 to 23. And what I'm going to do for committee this evening is just highlight some of the progress that's been made across the 10 equality objectives. So, Quality Objective 1, which is to improve how we involve, engage and communicate with protected groups about our work and decisions. There are two key points, I think, within that. The report picks up on the publication of the Council's public participation strategy in May 2022, and with it the formation of a new internal officers network that more effectively brings together the work of those colleagues who attend, for example, College and Youth Service and their expertise around engaging with young people, older people from the 50 Plus Forum, brings those colleagues together to share some of the insight they gain from their engagement and participation work. That forum is then aligned with the new elected member Champions Forum, our existing Equalities Consultative Forum, and the Council's Insight Board, and it's becoming a real sort of driver for an improved understanding in how those with protected characteristics use our services. Under Objective 1, the report also picks up on the appointment of a new age-friendly Vale officer to focus on developing the Council's 50 Plus strategy and progressing work towards achieving age-friendly status. Strategic Equality Objective 2 concerns the gender and ethnicity pay gaps. Both those are monitored on a quarterly basis and reported annually. The report details the gender pay gap currently being at £1.03 and the mean ethnicity pay gap at 65 pence. The report picks up that colleagues in our HR team are currently working to understand and seek to address some of the underlying issues there, and makes the point that recruitment is seen as central in doing that. And I think the report acknowledges that there needs to be an increased focus when recruiting to roles that we consider where we're advertising and promoting those vacancies in order to ensure we're getting applicants from a wide range of groups. Objective 3 follows on from that as it concerns how we improve employment opportunities in the council for protected groups, particularly those with disabilities and young people. The report highlights some work that was undertaken in National Apprentice Week 2023, where a youth event was held by the Communities for Work team to showcase the wide range of employment and training options there are for young adults in the Vale. Objective 4 states we'll continue to work on developing a more inclusive work environment that supports staff from all backgrounds to reach their potential. The report talks in detail about the work of GLAM and Diverse, two of the council's internal staff networks. It also references work that was underway then to establish Apple, a new disability network for the council. And while it would be outside the scope of the reporting period for this, committee may be pleased to hear that that network is also now established and being launched to colleagues. Objective 5 is to update and provide support to elected members. There was elected members training undertaken in 22-23, including some mandatory equality and diversity training, a digital citizen workshop, and equalities in decision-making and scrutiny sessions. Strategic Equality Objective 6 is that the council will develop and implement plans throughout the life of the strategic equality plan to address attainment gaps for children and young people and provide support to overcome the barriers to them reaching their full potential. I suppose given the nature of the report and the work of the council, this is perhaps the objective for which the report has got the most detail on council's activity, and it picks up on a number of initiatives, including the work of the vulnerable groups team to run education workshops for Syrian and Afghan parents, something that's noted as a significant success for the children supported, and work to support youth groups working with LGBTQ plus and disabled young people. It references the development of the transgender toolkit for schools, which I know was at this committee recently, picks up on the rollout of universal school meals, distribution of pupil development grants and school essentials payments, and has a thorough update from the social inclusion and wellbeing team, which picks up on the introduction of some new liaison engagement officers in September 2022, and an anti-racist schools project which runs across 6 schools in the Vale. Strategic Equality Objective 7 is to develop and implement processes to address hate crime, violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. This section of the report largely covers the work of the Safer Vale team and details a range of initiatives that have been undertaken to help improve recording and response to incidents of that nature. Strategic Equality Objective 8 then looks specifically at housing and housing needs of people with protected characteristics, picks up on the development of an older people's housing strategy and a smart houses scheme to support independent living. It also references the publication of a Gypsy and Traveller accommodation assessment in 2022, which I believe has since fed into the development of the new replacement local development plan. Strategic Equality Objective 8 is to work in partnership to consider issues relating to transport accessibility, particularly for disabled people and older people. And the report references some bus stop improvements that were taking place across the Vale, and work to ensure that all Green Links drivers are able to transport passengers with disabilities. Strategic Objective 10 is to promote our natural and built environment and cultural heritage to protected groups, and that includes some information on improved accessibility at Barry Island, where new beach wheelchairs have been made available, as well as a new changing places facility at the Western Shelter. The report then picks up some other activity that's relevant to the general duty around equalities. Talks about some anti-racism training that was delivered to SLT and other departments, explains the disability confidence scheme under which the council's approach to recruitment is accredited, looks at the Stonewall Diversity Champion Network that the council is a member of, and the council's status as a Race Equality Matters trailblazer. And finally, the report includes a bit of a breakdown of employment information by protected characteristics for the period April 22 to March 23, as provided by our colleagues in HR. That's an overview of what's in the report. In line with the statutory duty and following consideration by Cabinet in January and committee this evening, the Council will now publish its annual report on the equality section of our website to make all of this information available to citizens as well. That's pretty much what's there. I'm happy to take any questions from committee now, of course. And I think Tom Baring is also here, who might be able to speak to parts of this. But I suppose I should make the point that the annual equalities monitoring report is compiled by the equalities team within corporate resources, but covers the work of the whole organisation. So if members would like detail on the examples in the report, I might need to take some of that away and speak to the relevant service area and get back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob, for that. So over to councillors. So Councillor Hennessy, first of all.
Hiya, Rob. Thanks for the report. Excellent report. I'm just querying one thing on page 11. It says we use the weekly movement sheets provided to us by the homeless to encourage homeless and residents to register to vote. And they all can put in for a £10 shopping voucher. Do we know if anyone has actually done this from the homeless or anyone from supported accommodation?
Yeah, I think this was an initiative run by the electoral services team. I'm afraid no, Councillor Hennessy, I don't have the answer to that for hand, but as I say, I can certainly pick that up with colleagues in Elect Reg and find out for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rhys Goodron.
Yeah, so on the equality monitoring form for employment, on the question, what is your gender, it doesn't include any option for non-binary people, and subsequently, there's no information about non-binary people when it comes to gender. So I was just wondering why that is, and if that might be changed in the future.
Yeah, I wonder if there's an HR issue that might be one that Tom would like to speak to.
Cindy, thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Rob. I think it's as a result of the way that information is passed on to another agency, and that's the reason why it's recorded in that particular way. But it is something that I know the HR team are looking at to see whether we can supplement that question to include those things that you highlight there. So let me take it away just to double check, and I'll confirm. But I think that's the reason.
Thank you. I can't see anything else from Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rob. In the Strategic Equality Objective 9, it mentions green links, which of course is an excellent scheme and vital for many people to not only get out of their houses, but to do the things that perhaps others just find straightforward enough. I have heard concerns recently, for a number of people that use green links regularly, that they haven't been billed for about 18 months and are now starting to receive quite hefty backdated lumps of requests for money, including one lady who had a bill for £550. I was just wondering if you know if that is the case, and also if it is, what's the issues, or what have been the issues, and have they been resolved? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hodges, for the question. I don't have the data to hand in terms of any issues with invoicing for Green Links travel, but certainly we can take that away, and I'll discuss it with the team, both in Environment and Housing, and also with my colleagues in Finance, to get an understanding of exactly what the issue may be there, and I'll ensure that an update is provided to you and the rest of the committee as soon as possible.
Thanks. I think Gemma can come in on that as well.
Apologies. Similar to Tom, I haven't got the full detail there, but I know we have recently taken some steps to address some of the issues in our debt recovery area. So there absolutely will be more final reminders and certainly beyond the initial reminder stage in terms of debt recovery. I think, Councillor Hodges, if there are specific cases that you want me to liaise with the income management team on, I'm happy to get involved. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Hennessy.
Yeah, to do with green links, Rob, is it possible for a school who doesn't have transport to use the system? Because I know a particular school wanted to use it, but they found it quite difficult to be able to do. Is there any way of being able to allow schools to use the green link system who don't have transport?
I'm not aware that it currently does work in that way, no. All I can say, Councillor Hennessy, is we could certainly pass that comment on to colleagues in the transport team and education for them to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. And mine is to do with, I think is 8, in transport and disabilities. Is the taxi service in the Vale of Glamorgan doesn't seem to be accessible to children, young adults, or older people who have disabilities. So it's one of the things that I questioned in a previous role, and it's one that I still question in terms of what contractual obligations do we have as a local authority to make sure that our taxis are also accessible? That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Councillor Payne. That would certainly be within the scope of the equality objective. And it does potentially seem like there's something in there that we could speak to colleagues in licensing about to understand what the, I suppose, parameters that are currently in place are, and whether anything could be done to ensure there are more accessible transport options available to residents.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Helen, or was that a legacy? Legacy. Thank you. I'd just like to ask Robert and Tom about, it mentioned a proposed disability action plan, and I was just wondering what stage we were at with that.
Within the body of this report, does that refer to the forthcoming Welsh Government Disability Action Plan?
Yeah, it mentioned it in the body of the report. So I was wondering, I guess, what input the Vale Council would have into that and when we were expecting it.
When Welsh Government will publish that action plan, we don't currently know. We expect it to be something that follows on from the lockdown report and some research that was undertaken during the pandemic. We do see it, though, as being a potential driver for our future strategic equality objectives, and there may also be some overlap with, I think I mentioned in the presentation there, ABLE, the council's new internal disability network. We would hope, I suppose, to see some overlap in terms of what are being identified as national policy objectives and some things that we could play in within the organisation. Okay,
thanks, Rob. And then a final thing from me, you mentioned, and it's in the report, about a variety of training sessions provided by external providers. Do you have the costs for those? I mean, I don't expect you to have them to hand, but would it be possible to find out what those cost?
I don't have them to hand, no, you're correct, but I can certainly find those out and get back to you in writing.
Great, thank you, Rob. I can't see any other questions. So thank you, Rob and Tom, for that presentation. So I move that we note the report and that the comments here today be sent back to the Cabinet. So I move that we have a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Hodges.
Second.
Thank you very much. So I think the tech issues are all sorted now. So we're going to jump back to agenda item 5, proposed corporate strategy for children who need care and support 24 to 28. So it's Liz Jones and Martine Booker-Southard. Over to you.
Hello, Chair. Can you hear me and see me this time?
Loud and clear.
Fabulous. I'm not going to share my screen after the last technical bout. Members have got the report, so I'm just going to do a summary for you this evening. I am here representing learning and skills in terms of education, but this strategy was a joint endeavour from members from across the council, from officers from across the council. Now, what I wanted to say, what the strategy is. Now, the strategy is, I think, a good piece of work because it helps us as a council think about how we can improve the general well-being of children, young people and their families who, for whatever reason, need care and support. This is our 3rd edition of this strategy, and it shows what we'll be doing over from 2024 to 2028. Now, this strategy, I think, is different because the consultation that we've done over the past year in 2023 was really, really thorough. And the voices that really resonated with me as part of the consultation process were the voice of the children and young people. So for me, that makes the strategy really genuine and authentic because the voice of the child and the young person was present throughout the consultation with adults who are parents and carers as well as other professionals. And this strategy also supports the council to be good corporate parents because within the context of the corporate parenting charter, this strategy as a mechanism to promote the collective responsibility of the council to safeguard and promote the rights and life chances of our care experienced children and young people. Now, as I've said, we listen to children, and what was really important with the strategy, the children were very clear. They said they wanted the grown-ups to understand how they felt, which meant they wanted to know why and how decisions were made and their views listened to. And they were very clear in saying that we want the grown-ups around us to understand the good and bad things about us. And they wanted the grown-ups to get to know them and know the things they like and know the things that mean a lot to them. And the sessions we had with parents and carers, their voices were very clear, and they talked about how they wanted to be supported and they wanted to be talked. They didn't want to be talked about, I didn't want to be talked to. They wanted to be participants in the decision making for their children and young people. And they were very clear with us to say that there's no substitute for clear, timely and accurate information. The parents and carers talked about wanting to be heard when things aren't going so well, and they want their voices to be heard when things are going so well. And their parents and carers talked about having stable and matched education arrangements for our children. And when we consulted with the professionals, they talked about having more efficient and effective information sharing. And again, it was interesting that all the professionals talked about how the voice of the child needed to be at the heart of the strategy. So what I'm bringing to this group is that the strategy is important because the objectives are going to be explicit in the different directorate of the council that are appropriate to, especially housing, learning skills. Obviously, it goes without saying, children's services. And the 4 objectives are key because it's about supporting families to stay together and reduce the need for children to be looked after. And the strategy talks about managing risk confidently and provide support for the children on the edge of care. And it talks about making sure that as council we provide and commission flexible and affordable range of services that are of high quality. And something that we really heard was children having a planned journey through care, especially when they were finishing their time in care. So this strategy gives us 4 years to complete 33 actions. And to make sure we are accountable as local authority officers, there'll be regular monitoring through a corporate strategy manager group. And what we are planning to do is report the progress to the scrutiny committees, hence we're here today. So what we'll be doing is we'll be making sure there's an action plan to keep us all in check as local authority officers, to check the progress of existing actions. And also, if we meet those actions, how we make sure there are new appropriate actions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Martine. So over to councillors, committee members now for any comments or queries. Councillor Marshalsea.
Hi, Martine. Thanks so much. I've just got a question. On Objective 2, it says to manage risk confidently and provide support at the edge of care, encourage the promotion of support services available through schools to empower families who may be at the edge of care to come forward and approach agencies for help to prevent escalation. Obviously, prevention is key in supporting families in need. And I just was wondering, obviously we know that the most vulnerable may struggle to come forward for a variety of reasons. So I was just wondering how these services will be promoted.
When we were doing the consultation, we were talking about how we need to be more creative, sharing our message. So we talked about social media, we're talking about through schools, and just making sure that the professionals that work with children and young people, that we are really explicit and we're proactive. We don't wait for crisis before we let families know about the Families First advice line. So how are we planning to reach more people to be proactive? It's us, all of us, our responsibility who are working with children and young people to say, these are the mechanisms. And from my understanding, the work we were doing was just making sure that our social media communication is clear, and on our internal and external websites, that the different places where people can go for support, especially in the third sector, are explicit. So just making sure we update our internal and external websites as well.
Amazing. Yeah, so I guess it's just making sure that those staff are aware of Families First, etc. Personally, I used Families First advice line a few weeks ago and they were amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Gilligan. We can't see you, Wendy, or hear you. Yeah, okay. Bottom right, there's a mute button, which you might have to click. Not unclick. We can try come. Yeah, but we'll come back to Wendy. Martin Price.
There we are. I mean, the strategy looks great and so on, but there isn't much reference in there to the resources required to deliver this. Resources in terms of money and in terms of staffing available for doing it. Is that, I would have thought that might have appeared within the strategy to explain over the next 4 years how it might be delivered.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, Councillor Price.
Yeah.
Okay. When we were looking at this strategy and drafting the strategy, was very much narrative of delivering the strategy within the existing resources. And so we understand as professionals there will be a challenge, but the idea, my understanding, is that this strategy will be delivered within existing resources, and therefore the actions will have to look at them and which ones are doable and which ones will have to do, for example, longer term strategies as well. So how are we going to do it? How are we going to finance it? It's within existing resources.
Right. Okay. I mean, there are huge aspirations in there, which are great. I'm just
it's
worried,
really ambitious.
Given the constraints, the financial constraints within the council as to whether it's deliverable, how much of it is deliverable. That's what I was concerned about.
I think when we had these discussions, because the plan is over, because the strategy is over 4 years, it's being realistic with ourselves, and that's why having the management group allows us to have those conversations about which actions we need to prioritise, because the strategy is so important, because we have to deliver in terms of supporting the children on the edge of care. So it's part of all of our work, and we have to do it within existing strategies, and it is challenging. Talking from myself in terms of learning skills and the conversation of children, young people services, it is tough. But as officers, the idea was that we are delivering this strategy within our existing resources. So the partnership work is key, especially with our partners in the third sector.
Okay. Thank you.
Karen, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, Chair. Just wanted to come in to help Martine out, really, because it is an ambitious strategy, absolutely, but it is a strategy not just in relation to all departments within the council, but also our third sector partners are signed up to that. So when I say third sector partners, I mean agencies such as Llamai, Action for Children, Barnardo's. Our health colleagues are signed up to it in Cardiff and the Vale UHB. So there are commitments in there, not just from us as Children's Services or Learning and Skills. There are commitments that go across all of those agencies. And, you know, yes, it's ambitious, but we believe that we can achieve those actions and we can achieve them within the resources that are already allocated to our individual departments, and for us working collaboratively with our partner agencies such as health, such as our third sector partners as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Penn.
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Brilliant. Apologies for my late arrival. Governor's meeting overran. Thanks, Martine. I'm aware that some over 18s are still cared for. It's over 12 months since the pilot scheme for the basic universal income was introduced for care leavers. Has there been any evaluation on how that's doing? Although I do note there's been positive feedback. Are you aware of how the outcomes are going? I know that's not in the report. I just saw it follow on from people leaving care.
Councillor Penn, I'm going to say I would have to go back to my colleagues who work in the 14 plus team and provide an update that way, because I don't have that detail.
No problem.
Yeah. I think Elliot Karen wanted to come in on that one.
Yep.
Our 14 plus team, we have got a number of young people who are on the basic income pilot. And for us at this time, it's going extremely well. We're still waiting for an overall review from Welsh Government, but in relation to the small number of young people in the Vale of Glamorgan in receipt of the basic income, it is making a difference, and it is going really well for those young people in receipt. It hasn't been easy. There have been bumps in the road equally, and there has been problems. But I think we've got the advice package wrapped around now with Citizens Advice Bureau as well, who are providing support for our young people alongside their YPAs.
Thank you, Karen. I just had a question, Martine. It was in Objective 4. I'd just like to focus on one action point, which comes under the remit of learning and skills. And it's got a time scale of this September. It talked about embedding IDPs and PEPs. And I'm just wondering what embedding them meant in practice.
Chair, embedding them is the first step is the personal education plans and the PEPs. What we've worked on for the past 2 years is making sure that our personal education plans are robust and updated regularly. So we've developed a professional portal. So children who are looked after by the Vale, if they're educated in the Vale or outside the Vale, we're able to have oversight of their personal education plans. So in terms of embedding that process we will be achieved by September, and aligning the IDP process. That is something we're still working on with our colleagues in ALN, but the ambition is to have a seamless process that's child-centred by September, because between the ALN Act's changes and making sure we comply with the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, we need to make sure that these plans are person-centred and reviewed regularly. So in terms of will they be embedded by September, I would say we are well on our way to achieving this action by September 2024.
Okay, and are you confident there are enough people to write and update those plans?
I would say at the moment, in terms of the personal education plan element, we do have the resource for that at the moment. And in terms of the ITP element, which is section 2 of the personal education plans, that's something we're working with our colleagues in ALN to make sure that that process works well for children who we look after. So in terms of have we got enough people to write those IDPs, I would say that's something we are not reviewing at the moment.
Okay. Liz, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, please, Chair. Just to say that Martine is correct in saying at the moment we have capacity, and we've done that through temporary arrangements because we've made good use of a Welsh Government ALN implementation grant, but it is a recognised pinch point. And like Martine says, we are well on the way to be able to achieve our intentions. But it is in recognising that we've needed to boost capacity to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Right, okay. Thank you both. Councillor Gilligan.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me now and see me. Sorry about that. I just had to reboot the computer to see if it worked. I don't know whether this question's already been asked now because obviously I've been absent for a while. If it has, I do apologise. But my question is, what provision and support are given to children who have been fostered when they attend school? Because obviously they might have to go to a different school, etc. Or if they are in the same school, you know, what allowances, etc., are given to them. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. What provision is available for children looked after in schools? What we expect from the schools and what schools do is they provide provision matched to the child's needs. So it is if children are moving placements and we need to do additional pre-admission meetings, additional transition meetings, additional visit. It's all based on a case-by-case basis and looking at what the child's needs are and looking at what is achievable in terms of transportation. So, for example, if children are placed out of county and we need to do additional visits, sometimes we have to make sure those visits are done, or they have to be done virtually, because the pre-admissions meetings are trickier to do when it's from the receiving school and the school and their previous school. So what provisions do we make? We do it on a child-led basis. So I don't mean to sound vague, but each provision is different per looked after child's need, even if they are the same sibling group. We have to look at what the child's needs are and work closely with our partners in children and young people services to make sure we meet those needs. But I would say our schools are child-centred and do understand that we have to work within what the child's needs are and often put other more challenging discussions aside, because sometimes we do have discussion like what Liz said in terms of can we make sure the IDPs are in place, but as far as we're concerned as a local authority in learning and skills, we do make sure that we can support the children as best as we can on entry and monitor how they're doing once they're in school.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. I can't see any more hands up. So thank you for the presentation and for taking the questions. So I move that we note the progress made in developing the new corporate strategy and action plan, and that our committee's feedback and comments will be inform the development of the final draft of the strategy that will go to Cabinet. If I could have a seconder for that. Hennessy, thank you very much. And Councillor Goodjohn, thank you. Thank you, Martine.
Thank you, Chair.
So we'll jump back now to agenda item 7, review of Vale of Glamorgan Council strategic equality objectives for 2024-2025. Rob Jones.
Thanks, Chair. So back to the strategic equality objectives. This report concerns reviewing the objectives for 24-25. I won't repeat what I said at the start of the last item in explaining the Equality Act and the duties that it puts on the council, but I will add that one of the specific duties for Wales, the context here is the requirement to draw up and publish a strategic equality plan, which includes equality objectives. And under these duties, the equality objectives must be reviewed no less than every 4 years. The council published its current equality objectives in 2020, and what with it now being 2024, the time to review those has come around. What this report proposes is that the council retain its existing equality objectives for a further year, with a view then to publishing a new strategic equality plan from 2025 onwards. And the principal reason for this is to enable us to make use of a range of new data and insight that's quite recently become available or is soon to become available. But for obvious reasons, it's important that we're able to inform the development of our strategic equality plan with robust data and research. I guess that's what will ensure that our future equalities objectives make a meaningful impact on areas of known disadvantage, both nationally and locally. To do that, we want to make the best use of some recent outputs from Welsh Government and other bodies. Essentially, we're looking now to give ourselves the time to do this, I suppose. The first of these pieces of insight that's becoming available to us, the Equality and Human Rights Commission's latest is Wales Fairer report. So that was published in November 2023. It's a national piece of research. They refer to it as their State of the Nation report on equalities and human rights in Wales. Their last report, the last is Wales Fairer report, which was published in 2018, was fundamental to informing our current strategic equality plan. It's a very good source of insight into issues within Wales. And so obviously we want to give ourselves the opportunity to thoroughly consider what's come out of the latest report with some of our service leads. We want to also take into consideration the Welsh Government's new equality objectives, which were also published in November. And it seems that the feeling there is mutual, because in the publication of that report, Welsh Government said they hoped other public sector organisations would develop their own tailored local objectives to match the national approach. There's also a fairly recent Anti-Racist Wales action plan from Welsh Government. It's LGBT+ action plan, and the disability action plan, which we expect to be published fairly soon, which came out of the locked-out report, which we picked up on in the last item. All of that, all of those are, we hope, key sources of Wales level insight. Also, and perhaps even more importantly, we'll very soon have our own very robust local data, and that's the data that we'll get from the Let's Talk About Life in the Vale survey, which ran towards the end of last year. That data is currently in the final stages of analysis with Data Cymru. We should have that available to us very soon as well. When we do have that, when we do have the full data sets, we'll be able to see at a Vale level differences in perception of life in the Vale and the influence of council services on that, broken down by a number of demographics, including some protected characteristics. And I guess access to all of that data for us to consider internally is obviously important. Perhaps a bigger driver, again, in trying to work towards a 2025 date for new equalities objectives, is that once we've got that data available to us, we've had a chance to consider it internally within some of our officer networks, we would then have the opportunity to go and sort of test that with citizens with protected characteristics and groups in the Vale that advocate for them. And the one thing that we want to be absolutely fundamental to developing a future set of equalities objectives would be to, I suppose, understand the local context of some of the national trends that research will be picking up on. It really is vital to getting the job done properly. It's obviously good data drives good decisions, and we all know that. But I think in regard of issues relating to equalities and inclusion, if we're looking just at national data, there is a bit of a risk of maybe assuming that there's a kind of universal experience for people with protected characteristics. That's obviously not the case. There's no universal experience of being an older person living in the Vale, a person with a disability. Certainly not true for citizens who may have more than one of those protected characteristics. So being able to take what's coming out at a national level and test that by speaking to people with lived experience in the Vale is that's what will allow us to develop the best possible strategic equality plan for the council for the future. There's a couple of other points to the rationale as well. Again, it's obviously important that our strategic equality plan and the objectives it contains are closely linked to the council's wider corporate objectives, as contained in the corporate plan. The timescale for these two strategies is currently slightly out of sync with the strategic equality plan as it was running 2020 to 2024, the corporate plan running 2020 to 2025. So the approach we're talking about here would allow us to align the two from 2025 onwards. That's a factor in this as well. So that's what we're proposing in this. I'm fully aware that in a report that's entitled Review of Vale of Glamorgan Council Strategic Objectives 2024 to 2025, I've talked largely about the period beyond 2025, but that's because I think it's the context of this is key. What we're proposing is in effect a sort of 1 year extension of the current plan to enable the work that I've just spoken about to take place. It's something we've already discussed with representatives of individuals with protected characteristics in the Vale and advocacy groups via our Equalities Consultative Forum. There was support for it there, and what is proposed in the report is, following consideration at Cabinet recently and at this committee tonight, will then undertake a little bit more targeted engagement with groups like the 50 Plus Forum, the Youth Cabinet, the Public Services Board, on that proposal to maintain the existing objectives, just for, I suppose, a bit of a further sounding of that 1 year extension, and at the same time elicit some ideas for how we might be able to undertake some more in-depth engagement and move towards a collaborative development of a new strategic equality plan for 2025 onwards. So that's the gist of it for that report. Thanks to committee for taking time to consider it, and I'm happy to take any questions on this one as well.
Thank you for that, Rob. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Rob. I raised this issue last year, I think, with the Wales Audit Office with their planning, and I'm going to raise it again as well. Within this, one of the biggest impacts we've had in terms of equalities and the population of the UK, Wales and Barry and the Vale, is mental health. But mental health is not singled out as a separate issue. It's tagged into disabilities. So I would be really interested in the impact mental health has on the quality of life of people in the Vale of Glamorgan. And also there is a massive stigma attached to people who have mental health issues in terms of their life. And I don't see it reflected in anything. I've been waiting for you to finish to kind of bring it up. But it's so important, and it would be something I personally would like included, and I would like to know what is the state, what is the state of the mental health of the Vale of Glamorgan in a way. And it's not just a health issue, it's an equality issue. I'll stay on camera this time because I disappeared last time.
There we go. Thanks for the question. I suppose to talk about mental health and how it might be included in future strategic equality objectives, I suppose this would be a good example of one of those issues that maybe it's not a protected characteristic in its own right. It's obviously linked to disability, as you say there, but we might expect to see as a common factor across negative experiences of people with existing protected characteristics, and probably more commonly where people may have more than one. There's some reference in the that locked-out report that I mentioned earlier, and in the LGBTQ plus action plan research of the impact of living with protected characteristics on people's mental health. And I suppose it's something that, again, it's that sort of thing that's being identified in a general sense in some of that national research.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you there. It's linked to if you have a protected characteristics and mental health. But I personally think that it should be a separate issue. It should be a separate, something we should look at separately. And I'm sure the stats are there as well from the Health Board. But there are other factors that impact on people's life when they have mental health issues about employment, training, work, social life, living, and that does impact a lot of people, and particularly since lockdown. Over the last 3 years, I think there's been a significant rise, particularly with young people. So, it's an important issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know colleagues were picking up on just some of those points earlier in this meeting. And I suppose what I'd say to that is it's exactly the sort of thing that we would, or obviously wouldn't like to uncover it, but it's the sort of thing that if that comes through some of the local research we're doing, as you say yourself, those stats must be available at a Vale level. And if it's something that warrants an objective or actions in its own right, that's exactly what we would be looking to do with a future strategic equality plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I can't see any other comments or queries. So in that case, I move that we note the report and those committee comments go back to Cabinet about mental health. So if I could have a seconder for that. Councillor Hennessy, thank you very much. Thank you, Robert.
There we go. Thanks all.
Good night. So now we'll move on to agenda item 8, initial budget for 24-25 and the medium-term financial plan 24-25 to 28-29 proposals for consultation. Gemma.
Thank you very much, Chair. Could you show my slides, please, Amy? Thank you. And I will apologise again for those of you who've seen these slides a few times. So the revenue budget setting out the 24-25 proposals, but also the proposals across the medium term was reported to Cabinet in January. I think, you know, a really challenging budget process, and I probably used that last year, and now I wish I hadn't, because certainly I think certainly more challenging again for 24-25 and looking forward as well. And I think some of the elements that we're reporting as pressure points in terms of pressures around looked after children, increased complexity in adult social care, some of the additional learning needs pressures that we're seeing in schools, but generally an affordability problem in terms of schools budgets and homelessness are really emerging in that national picture as well. The report that went to Cabinet in November set out adjusted cost pressures of approximately 21 million against initial unadjusted cost pressures of 38 million. And those figures have largely stayed unchanged from the November report. We did do a further review at the senior leadership team level, but it was felt that those cost pressures couldn't be reduced any further. Work has been undertaken by directorates to assess their ability to mitigate unawarded cost pressures. And obviously that's really important given that significant gap, because any unawarded cost pressures that can't be mitigated by directorates will in some cases result in overspends in 24-25 and of course unplanned drawdown from reserves, which is really going to affect the Council's ability to invest in transformational proposals and be able to manage the medium-term position. It's really important that members are aware that this proposal only includes 75% of the funding that would be required as part of the assumed pay pressures for 24-25. So that means all service areas have that inbuilt saving before they even start looking at the savings proposals that are set out in this report. Of course, we don't know what the pay proposals are going to be in 24-25, but we have made assumptions there. Priority as part of this budget proposals has been given to social care, schools and homelessness. And the intention is to mitigate issues seen in schools in the 23-24 budget, to manage some additional learning needs growth and additional provision required. Looked after children growth and increased complexity and growth in adult social care, growth in homelessness, and of course inflationary pressures and pay pressures represent a significant part of that. We received the provisional settlement just before Christmas, and the increase was 3.1%, and that was there or thereabouts what we reported in the November report, so there was about a £20,000 difference. This report models an increase in council tax at 6.7%, and taking it up to that level has allowed the removal of some savings that were initially put forward. So there was a saving, for instance, in relation to supported bus services that was removed from the proposals. The total savings requirement set out in the proposals totals 7.8 million. This is an unprecedented level for the council. There is a mix of tactical and transformational savings. But as we come on to the savings slide, you'll see there's certainly far more tactical savings than transformational savings. But I think that, you know, given the timescales in terms of implementing those savings, that is prudent. But what we need to develop as a council to become sustainable over the medium term period is more transformational proposals to give us that lead time to manage future budget pressures. There is a higher level of savings in discretionary services. There currently, as part of these budget proposals, is one small saving in the schools area, which is linked to a specific proposal that intends to reduce energy usage in schools. There are significant pressures in future years too. So, for instance, when I show the summary slide, you'll see that there is a 9.4 million estimated shortfall in 25-26. So as a council, there is work that's being undertaken to consider what the organisation will look like or need to look like in 2030 in terms of the target operating model and how we get there, and the need to be able to transform to be sustainable going forward. This budget report also includes fees and charges for 24-25. Generally, fees and charges have been increased by 6.7%, which was linked to September's CPI, although there has been a decision not to increase fees and charges at that level in some areas. And I think specifically in the learning and skills area, there were some changes made in the 23-24 financial year. And as a result, some increases to fees and charges haven't been reflected in the budget proposals. The report tries to link some of the budget proposals to the results of the Life in the Vale survey. And I think relevant to this scrutiny committee is that the linkages with the priority given to protecting the vulnerable, and respondents did highlight the priority for easily accessible care and healthcare services when I and my family need them, which was ranked extremely highly. In terms of the budget planning cycle, I have shared this slide before, and broadly illustrates that budget planning cycle is a year-round process. But I just wanted to draw out some of the steps that have been taken as part of the process to developing these budget proposals. So Directorate submitted cost pressures at the start of September, and there was an initial review by senior leadership team. There have been 2 rounds of budget working groups held, and that had members from finance, HR, the leader, directors and heads of service, and cabinet members. The first budget working group focused on an initial review and refinement of cost pressures, which fed into the updated cabinet report in November. We've also, as a council, engaged with Budget Forum, and a further meeting is scheduled for March. The second budget working group was focusing on savings proposals and any potential transformation proposals that could be put forward by services. There was then a further review by senior leadership team and business cabinet of savings, and then following the provisional settlement as well. This slide sets out the 5-year position. So as you can see, projected increase in funding of 13 million in 24-25. And that includes some adjustments to the use of smoothing reserves. Those cost pressures totalling just short of 21 million for 24-25, and a gap of 7.8 million, which will be addressed by the savings proposal set out in this report. But you will see that there are significant shortfalls across the period in the report as well. And obviously, as we get closer to a financial year, we do tend to report more cost pressures because there are more emerging needs, but we have attempted to project some of those regularly recurring cost pressures across that medium-term period. In terms of specific cost pressures that are relevant to this scrutiny committee, that have been awarded in 24-25. So that's the first column of this table. There's funding for demographic increase in pupils requiring placement in special school, and that has not been awarded in full, but around 75% of the need. Funding has also been set aside for a number of satellite provisions and resource bases, including the primary Welsh immersion unit. Although I should note that in the final budget proposals, the allocation of these cost pressures won't be entirely to schools. I believe a couple of these provisions will need to sit within central education. Gwynant Resource Base, Holton Primary School Resource Base. There is funding set aside for the teaching pay award and the non-teaching pay award, and that's offset by a projected reduction in energy costs. And that isn't a reduction based on 22-23. That's based on the additional funding that was allocated as part of the 23-24 budget. And members may recall that a proportion of that was funded by reserves in 23-24, hoping that a step down would then be achievable. Within the report, there is an appendix that sets out the difference between the cost pressures that were submitted and the cost pressures that were adjusted and then put forward as part of the budget proposals. And this just looks specifically at cost pressures that were put forward for schools, but you will see that there is a significant gap, and some of these areas will need to be managed. Some of these areas means that that provision will not be able to be implemented, but there potentially are consequences elsewhere in the budget of not being able to do that. You'll see that the mainstream demographics pressure for schools was not awarded, and that's based on the data that's reflected in the council settlement. This slide attempts to reflect then the relative protection that was intended as part of the budget proposals. So you'll see there is a small reduction for the Central Learning and Skills Service. There's a projected increase of just short of 5% for schools, a significant increase of 13% for social services. And some of this addresses the demand pressures that we're seeing in 23-24 and intends to address those. You'll see that in terms of other services, there's a net reduction of just short of 4%. Okay. This slide attempts to set out the savings across the council, and you'll see there's quite a broad range of savings proposals that have been put forward, totalling that 7.8 million. And as I picked up earlier, just short of 1.4 million of transformational proposals, but the majority of the savings put forward are very much of a tactical nature, and obviously that isn't sustainable over the medium term, and very much focus will need to be on savings of the more transformational nature going forward. So in terms of specific savings that have been put forward relevant to this scrutiny committee, as I picked up earlier, there's an energy saving proposal in schools that's related to switching off ICT equipment when it's not required. And that's based on a model that's been implemented in Wrexham. And a saving of 180,000 has been put forward on that basis. In terms of central learning and skills, there are a number of proposals. So reduction to the provision for non-maintained nursery providers, and that removes the final non-maintained nursery provider within the council. Move to full cost recovery position for adult community learning. Proposals around the use of Old Hall, potential slight budget adjustment in the school improvement space, and a proposal to offset costs through targeted use of new grant funding, and that's in the youth services space. I just wanted to quickly pick up on use of reserves. So there is continued use of reserves as part of this budget in 24-25, and that is mainly in respect of homelessness and energy pressures. There are some risk-based reserves that the council is seeking to maintain and will be utilising utilising in 24-25. And those are things like pay pressures, legal reserve and corporate landlord. And those are particularly needed now. We're seeing quite a marked reduction in service-specific reserves. We have established reserves to support transformation. So we have a risk reshaping investment reserve and digital reshaping reserve. And these reserves have been increased to allow for some of those invest to save or transform schemes to go forward. And there is a need to set aside some further additional reserves as part of the final proposals, and that will be done through a review of existing reserves and reallocation. So proposals to set aside additional funding for social services, given the volatility of that budget area, and also setting aside funding for budget risk. So in 23-24, we project to achieve about 85% of the council's savings. Obviously, the savings proposals for 24-25 are even more challenging, and so it's unlikely those savings will be achieved in full in year one, and therefore a sum will need to be set aside in reserves to manage that risk. Just picking up on the final slide around the timetable. So the budget is out for consultation at the moment, and it's also out for public consultation. Really keen to get as many comments on the budget report as possible. Those comments will be fed into the final proposals that will go forward to Cabinet on the 29th of February. Once the council receives the final grant settlement, that will be fed then into the proposals that go forward to council on the 6th of March. Happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Gemma. Councillor Hennessy.
Hello, Gemma. Oh. Yeah, sorry, Gemma. I have two questions. One's to do with school transport. Are you able to tell this committee how much we are over budget by at the current time? And I presume where council transport is not getting any more money. And do you have any predictions of how to get us out of the mess we're in at the moment? You can answer that question first if you want.
Thank you. So the overspend in schools transport is in the region of 600,000 in 23-24. There is some additional funding allocated as part of the budget proposals, but it relates specifically to the demographic increase we're seeing in special schools and the need to be able to transport those pupils to and from special schools. So it doesn't reflect the some of the inflationary pressures. And in part, it's because of market failure in respect of school transport that we're seeing in 23-24. So there have been a number of pressures that have hit the school transport providers. Now, I understand that education and neighbourhood services have had meetings to discuss how some of the school transport pressures can be mitigated going forward. But I haven't heard of any specific proposals that have come out of those discussions. But I am happy to follow up on that conversation and try and address that mitigation as part of the final proposals, because I accept where we've got those significant pressures, we do need to understand how they'll be mitigated going forward.
Yeah, I'm happy for you to do that. I don't know what's gone wrong with this thing. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy for you to do that, but it still doesn't help parents who are trying to get transport. At the current time, the average cost if a parent lives outside of a catchment area is £1,000 to find to go to Cowbridge or whatever, to go to public transport. It doesn't help if this council is not putting any more money back into school transport. I understand there is budget constraints, and I understand we can look at it, but if we just keep looking at it and looking at it, all we're ever going to see is school transport is going to stay in the red for the foreseeable future. And that's not a healthy thing. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to come in on Councillor Hennessy's point in relation to parents who are wanting to get transport for their children when they're outside of the catchment area. I don't believe that does relate to a budgetary issue. That relates to the transport policy that we have in place, and they're not entitled to free school transport. But I do appreciate that that is a difficulty for some parents. However, they are advised when they are applying for a school place, if they are outside of the catchment area, they would not be eligible for school transport in that particular instance.
Okay, and my second question was, with schools more than likely not going to get any more funding, I'm going to stay in the red for probably the next 3 years if they don't find their way out. Does this council expect schools to have to make redundancies?
I think this council is working with schools to review their budget position. There are a number of initiatives that are being put forward by education to try and help address some of those budget pressures. And I know that they were outlined briefly on the schools briefing that we held last week. So I think we talked about proposals around addressing some of the agency costs that schools are experiencing and trying to manage that collectively, and also looking at collective procurement to try and address budgetary pressures. There have been redundancy proposals put forward by schools to address budgetary issues, and that may continue, but that is just part of the solution to addressing pressures. There has been additional funding allocated to schools as part of these budget proposals, but I accept a lot of that additional funding will need to be utilised on pay pressures, and we haven't been able to allocate all the funding for pay pressures or additional learning needs growth. But a significant proportion over and above the increase in the SSA has been allocated for schools as part of these proposals. I can see Paul is going to come in. Okay.
I don't know whether this is a glimmer of hope, but there was a ministerial announcement today about the additional funding that's come to Wales and is coming into local government. And in that statement, reference was made to that funding being used for social care. And the Teachers' Pay Award was also referenced in that statement. However, when you look at the amount of funding and you take out what would be required for social care, it leaves very little. So I'm doubtful that that would cover the Teachers' Pay Award on an all Wales basis. So I still think there will be a shortfall, even taking that additional funding into consideration. I think Gemma's covered your question really, but yes, schools need to look at their budget, obviously on the school by school basis, and I'm afraid some will find themselves in a position where they might need to make redundancies. That was certainly what we saw in the current financial year, and I think the position will be tighter in the coming year. But we are looking at a number of initiatives to support schools, but we acknowledge it is a very difficult situation.
Thank you. Rhys Goodron.
So I checked the budget, and there's a plan to implement charges for post-16 public transport, right?
That is a proposal for 25-26. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So it's, from my experience in community youth groups, it's one of the highest priorities for young people, transport. And I spoke to the Vale Youth Forum about this, and they're heavily against the proposal for reasons including that it'll put people off taking school transport, which will make people more likely to take a car or not go at all, which is particularly terrible if you're thinking about the attendance crisis and how we need to get more young people in school. And it's targeted against rural areas because most Barrians can walk to their local school. There's no option for that in rural areas. You'll have to drive or not go at all. And there was an overwhelming feeling that school bus services are unreliable anyways, and creating charges would just be kicking us while we're down, if that makes sense. So I would like to propose a recommendation for the top priority of the council with any additional money when making the draft budget to go to prevent post-16 transport charges, school transport charges.
Thanks, Reese. We'll circle back on that at the end. We'll let other people have their say first. Theo?
Okay, so apart from ICT equipment, are there any other ways you plan to reduce energy use in schools?
We do have a number of decarbonisation proposals set out within the capital proposals that's on the next agenda item. They certainly don't go far enough in terms of addressing the need to decarbonise schools, but it's certainly a good start. So it includes looking at PV panels, and I think there might be some heat pumps as well. Obviously, where we're looking to install PV panels, we need to make sure the roof is of sufficient quality to be able to take those PV panels. Sorry, I won't go into too much detail about it because it will be on the next item, but that is an issue with some of our asset maintenance backlog in schools. So often those PV panels need to go alongside a roof renewal scheme as well on some of the older schools.
Thank you very much. Jamie?
Going back to Reese's point, I would agree. From personal experience, I go to a college in Cardiff, but there was a lot of Vale attendees, and last year it was really unreliable and up to like an hour late and being cancelled, and a lot of people from the Vale dropped out. And I feel that if you introduce extra charges, the dropout rate would really increase for people attending post-16 education. And this is something we've talked about in Youth Council. And I think they feel really strongly that free transport, especially to schools, is really important to them.
Absolutely happy to take away your comments and feed those back to the service. As you may or may not be aware, the post-16 transport has been something that the council has talked about for a long time. And I think the reason that it's been put forward as part of the budget proposals, and this absolutely doesn't mean that, you know, the impact of potentially implementing that saving is reasonable, but the reason it's been put forward is because it's a non-statutory service, and as part of the budget proposals, all non-statutory services have been reviewed for savings potential, given the weight of the cost pressures the council is experiencing in statutory services. But absolutely happy to feed these comments and concerns, which are really valid, back to the service. Okay.
Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. I think when we talk about school transport, the pressures, both financial and physical, with, you know, largely privatised, well, it is a privatised scheme that we have to buy into, and all the issues with that. What I see it as, first of all, and I understand the young people on the committee here, you need to look at where the issue really lies, and it's a failure of Welsh Government. If you look at Scotland, transport is free to the under 22s. Simple as that. And that was a political decision by Scottish Government, not only to give a service to younger people, not only for school or college, but even work, because of course it can go past school ages. And also it was a way of supporting their bus routes and their operators. So that is something I think that needs to be addressed at a national level here in Wales. When it comes to the shortfall in budget, it's going to be difficult, but it needs to be looked at, and we need to see what we can do collectively as a council to fill these gaps and these shortfalls. It's not going to be easy. I look forward to the proposals that come through after the consultation and see where we can go with that. But ultimately, it will be a political decision made by this council. And there we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gemma. I'm interested in the provision of school places in terms of the demand and what cost pressures that will have. So I know that there is more demand for English school places, and I know we can't predict, but is there a plan for the demand for English school places? Because I know that there were some young people this year that couldn't get in because there were no English school places left. So that's kind of an issue here. I noticed there's less funding for that as it continues along the budget line, so it's decreased. So there's going to be more demand, I anticipate, for English school places. That's kind of the crux of my question, really.
Being picked up in the next item on the capital budget. We will have proposals to increase the number of places. You'll notice, for instance, at St Richard Gwyn School, when the new building is provided there. In future cabinet, in the near future, we will be bringing forward proposals for the next band or the rolling programme for sustainable communities for learning, and you'll see in there that over the next 9 years we will have a number of schemes that we're considering to increase places not only in English medium schools but also in Welsh medium schools. So those will be brought forward soon. Of course, there is also the issue that these places need to be funded, and Gemma did refer to the demographic increases and what's been awarded in that respect. Yes, we can build schools, but we do need to be able to fund them through the revenue budget too. That will present a pressure in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Marshalsea.
Hi there. I was just looking at the school transport and was wondering basically, would an AELN school in the Western Vale reduce the cost of school transport?
we do need to look at the provision of an additional ALN school. We've not been specific about where that would be in the Vale, mainly because we would need to identify land for that provision. I mentioned the rolling programme that we'll be bringing forward soon to Cabinet, and you'll notice that there is within that programme mention of a scheme that would see a second ALN school built in the Vale of Glamorgan. Of course, that will require capital funding, and that hasn't yet been secured. So what you'll see in the rolling programme is a list of projects that we feel that we need to put into a programme, and then the internal funding, the local authorities match funding for those schemes would need to be identified at a future time.
Thank you.
Councillor Lynch-Wilson.
My question surrounds the autism satellite provision for the secondary sector. Will this provision just meet need, or is it future-proof with room to expand as we're expecting autism education to rise?
I'm hesitating because I was thinking Liz might want to come in on that question. And as if by magic, she's appeared. Thank you, Liz.
Hi, yes, I'm happy to take that. That's about, obviously, you're quite right, and identify we do have an increasing pressure on the need for provision for autistic spectrum condition. So that will meet current as well as future needs, albeit obviously I cannot say for definite how long it will meet future needs, because you are quite right in identifying the fact that this is a growing area. Thank you.
Councillor Lynch-Wilson, did you want to come back on that?
No, that answered my question. It's just a legacy hand.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gilligan.
Hi. Do we think with the increased cost of living pressure on family households that there'll be more demand for free school meals going forward in the next financial year? Thank you.
We have there is potentially a need for some increased free school meal numbers as part of the school's funding, and there will be some very limited provision that will be put forward. I'm currently thinking as part of the final proposals, but that would be subject to approval. So there would be some small need. Obviously, the picture with free school meals is slightly distorted with the rollout of universal free school meals as well. And I'm hoping Paula's going to come in at that point.
I think I saw Trevor appearing on the screen, wanting to come in.
Thanks, Paula. Yeah, so in relation to free school meals, we accelerated the rollout. So all of our children in primary education are entitled to a free school meal, and they're offered them on a daily basis. If you wanted to quantify that, that equates to about £475 a year that can save families. What we've seen since the rollout is our uptake has almost doubled. So it's gone from about 40% in schools, and we're sitting between 70-75% at the moment, off the top of my head, in terms of uptake. So we've seen a huge uptake in families wanting to access those free school meals for the children. But thankfully, we have that in place at the moment.
Thank you, Trevor. I can't see any other hands up at the moment. Oh, Ewan Goodjohn.
If the committee will allow me to speak, as I'm not a member. Yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify a point from Councillor Hennessy raised about, he stated there'd be no additional money for schools. I want to clarify that there is additional money for schools. School funding will increase by 4.95% as in the report. That's £5.66 million next year in 24-25 as part of these proposals. A large part of that will of course be taken up by the pay rise, but I think it's important to note that when councillors in the past have mentioned us using our reserves, part of that is, of course, school reserves, as that is reported as part of our reserves as a local authority. And so, sadly, as part of using reserves, schools has had to do part of that. And I know the concerns about that and how bad the situation is for some schools at the moment, and that does need to be uplifted. But when we've talked about using reserves, that has had to be one of them if you want to use them properly. But there is an uplift for schools. Whether that's enough is up to the committee and up to council to decide. But that is the situation.
Okay, thank you, Ewan. Paula, you mentioned the Barnet consequentials that are coming to the Welsh Government, and that you weren't confident it would cover everything. Obviously, everything that we needed. I was just wondering if you knew anything about the timescales around that funding coming through to the Rail Council.
I don't. I think Gemma's probably got a better idea of that.
Okay.
I've had some very initial figures from Welsh Government today in terms of the, I believe an element of it will be used to protect the social care workforce grant. So ring fence specifically for social care. And I think the rest will be coming via RSG, but it's I don't want to quote a figure because it obviously could be wrong, but it's certainly not significant to even resolve the differential in schools' pay awards.
Okay, thank you. And then, yeah, the pay awards, so there's any discussions with Welsh Government about that? Any more assistance in helping to fund that pay award?
I haven't had any information. Obviously, councils continue and leaders continue to lobby Welsh Government. Paula might be able to come in there.
Sure, yeah.
Gemma mentioned lobbying. Yes, the Association of Directors of Education in Wales have written to both the Minister for Education and Welsh Language and the Finance Minister to outline the situation with funding for education and schools and potential consequences. We have made a plea that should any additional funding become available, that the pay award, teachers' pay award, and the teachers' pensions increase should be prioritised. However, the indications given is that there will not be additional funding becoming available in the coming year, but we have lobbied Welsh Government.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any other requests to comment. I just want to come back to Rhys and your suggested recommendation. It would need an elected member to move that. If there are any elected members who'd like to move what you suggested. Councillor Hennessy, okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to move that.
Okay. It would need a seconder as well. Excuse me. It would need a seconder as well if there are any anyone out there who'd like to second that. No. Okay, all right. Thank you, Amy. In that case, then, I'll move to note the presentation and that the views expressed at the committee today will be referred to scrutiny at the Corporate Performance and Resources Committee and also to a special cabinet meeting on the 29th of Feb. If someone could second that. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, everyone. So we'll move on to agenda item 9, draft capital programme proposals 24-25 to 28-29. Back to Gemma or Vicky. Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. Amy, do you mind sharing the slides, please? Thank you. Okay, so the report sets out the draft capital programme for 24-25 to 28-29. And in December, the Welsh Government announced the provisional general capital funding settlement, and the amount awarded for 24-25 is 6.986 million. And that's made up of an element of grant and an element of supported borrowing. So this is a slight decrease on the general capital funding for 23-24, and no further indication was made within the provisional settlement. So going forward in the 5-year programme, we've assumed the 6.986 million going forward for each year. So the next slide gives a summary of the 5-year capital programme. So overall, over the next 5 years, the capital programme is projected to be £376.6 million, and that includes 22.3 million for the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, and also 78.5 million for the education pipeline schemes, which includes St Richard Gwyn and Ysgol Iolo Morgannwg. And you can see a further breakdown of those schemes provided scheme by scheme in Appendix 1. So this summarises the capital bids that were submitted. So capital bids were invited to be returned by the 20th of October. And in total, we had 47 bids that were submitted. So gross capital bids over the 5-year period and total 56.8 million, and here you can see those summarised over directorate, but again in Appendix 2 this is further detailed on a bid by bid basis. So the capital bids were taken to Insight Board and senior leadership team, and in order to fund high priority bids that have been submitted, a further review of the capital programme has to been undertaken. So some bids have been prioritised over schemes that are already approved in the capital programme, and this is due to the level of risk that they pose to the council. So on this next slide here, you can see the schemes that are proposed to be removed from the capital programme. So none of them are specific education schemes, but just for information, we are now writing the final capital proposals, and as part of that report, it is proposed that the landmass construction scheme is going to be put back in to the capital programme. So the bids that are proposed to be funded that are relevant to this scrutiny committee are detailed on this slide. So there's an additional 1.5 million for repairs and maintenance works to schools in 24-25, and then a million each year after that up to 28-29, and also the additional match funding that was required to carry out the Ysgol Iolo Morgannwg scheme is also being proposed to be funded. So in terms of next steps, similar to revenue, the reports are currently out to scrutiny. Consultation with the community is ongoing, and this ends mid-February, and that's going to feed into the final capital proposals. The final settlement from Welsh Government is due late February, early March, and then we'll take these final proposals to Cabinet on the 29th of February and then to Council on the 4th of March. Happy to take any questions on that report.
Thank you, Vicky. Any comments from committee members? I just had one. It mentions in the documentation that funding is being sought to lease a building for the specialist resource base at Pencoitra. Who's that money being sought from? Is it just Welsh Government or other bodies?
I believe we're looking internally for that funding, is my understanding. So I think that the need to identify that funding is quite urgent. So it may be that we're able to provide an update as part of the final proposals but I can try and get an update and report that back.
That'd be helpful, thank you. I can't see any other hands rushing up, so thank you, Vicky. So I move that we note the presentation and my comments sent to Cabinet, I guess, by Pinkham, if anyone would like to second that. Diolch, Councillor Hennessy. So now we move on to the final agenda item of the evening. Agenda item 10, Welsh in Education Strategic Plan, the WESP Annual Report 22-23. Lisa Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be aware of Welsh Government's Cymraeg 2050 strategy, which places a duty on all local authorities in Wales to increase the number of pupils that receive their education through the medium of Welsh. To address this, the Council has produced a Welsh in Education Strategic Plan, or WESP. The 10-year plan commenced in September 22 and will expire in August 2032. There is a particular emphasis in the WESP on increasing the number of learners in Year 1 taught through the medium of Welsh. A key commitment is the proposal to increase the number of Year 1 children taught through the medium of Welsh to 24% by 2032. Just to illustrate the position, we are currently at 15.8%, which gives you an indication of the size of the challenge. As part of the monitoring arrangement for our WESP, an annual review report, which is included at Appendix A, was submitted to Welsh Government last July. This outlined our progress in Year 1 of our WESP. We have unfortunately been able to table this report for you until now due to a delay in receiving the required feedback from Welsh Government. This was received just before Christmas and is included at Appendix 2. The feedback from Welsh Government was very positive and provided a basis for ongoing discussion and support. No amendments or revisions to the report were required as a result of the feedback received. You'll see in the report that our WESP progress is generally on track as capital projects ran to schedule and have already made a positive impact on our plans to achieve our targets. However, there remains some concern with regard to creating demand for Welsh medium education and the impact of lower birth rates across the Vale. It was acknowledged by Welsh Government that there has been a number of key achievements in Year 1 of the Council's WESP, which I'll outline to you shortly. It should be noted, however, that there is a risk due to the financial climate and pressures both nationally and within the Council. The reduced funding streams may have an adverse impact on our overall future WESP ambitions. Increased parental choice in admission decisions caused by a surplus capacity in some areas due to a lower birth rate can also dilute progress, and this will need to be considered carefully in engagement and promotion activities. Overall, this leaves us with a self-assessment of amber in terms of our first year, with some elements of green, in particular with reference to our capital programme. In terms of key achievements, the report outlines the expansion of Ysgol Sambarach into a 420-place school, which opened in April 2023. This is expected to facilitate Welsh medium growth within the Barry waterfront. 39 pupils were admitted to reception in September 23, and early indications are that there may be 60 new reception pupils joining them next September. The consultation on the expansion of Ysgol Morgannwg was successfully completed during the last academic year, and the new site is timetabled, as we just heard in the capital update, to open in September 2025. The Ysgol Morgannwg and Ysgol Sambarach schemes will provide an additional Welsh medium 60 places in primary in each year group going forward. Another particular key achievement was the development of a Welsh language centre, our Canolfan Iaith, which opened in February 2022. By the end of last academic year, there were 10 learners new to Welsh medium education who had graduated from the provision, with an additional 65 learners attending the centre, having been identified by their teachers as pupils who could benefit from additional support for Welsh language. Some of the learners in this group, in fact, a significant number of them, were at risk of leaving Welsh medium education at the time. For information, 8 additional learners new to Welsh medium education started at the Canolfan Iaith in September 23, and their progress will be reflected in the next year's annual report at the end of this academic year. The centre continues to grow from strength to strength. The WESP report, as you will see, outlines specific progress against the 7 outcomes, and I'll try and very briefly summarise them for you. There is, of course, additional detail in the report itself, and I'd be happy to take any questions on those. In terms of outcome 1, which is more nursery children, 3-year-olds, receive their education through the medium of Welsh. As I referred to just now, this is challenging, as Welsh medium education nursery figures have fallen considerably over the last few years across all of our schools, not just Welsh medium. According to PLASC in January 2020, there were 345 pupils in Welsh medium nurseries. In January 2023, this had fallen to 280. This is primarily due to a decline in birth rates. Currently, 17% of nursery-aged children are receiving early years education through the medium of Welsh, which is a little lower than anticipated. To address this, promotion and engagement activities are a key aspect of our Year 2 plans. Whilst the Council has increased capacity in the nursery sector to facilitate future Welsh medium growth, the challenge remains in terms of engaging parents. Outcome 2 is more reception class children or 5-year-olds receive their education through the medium of Welsh. As previously advised, during the reporting year, 15.8% of Year 1 children were taught through the medium of Welsh, and it's an almost identical figure for reception. This would clearly need to be improved upon if we are going to reach our target of 24% by 2032. And there are proposals and actions within the action plan for this year, which will be reported on at the end of this academic year, that are the building blocks towards that. Outcome 3 is more children continue to improve their Welsh language skills when transferring from one key stage of their statutory education to another. Generally speaking, transition and retention rates, as you'll see in the report, are positive, and they are monitored by the Council Admissions Team, the WESP Forum, and the sub-working groups within the forum. There is some concern in relation to transition from primary to secondary in some geographical areas of the Vale. It's hoped that a transition and immersion post, which has been funded by the Welsh Medium Immersion Grant we get from Welsh Government this academic year, would have a positive impact on this, and we'll be evaluating that as part of our Year 2 report. Outcome 4 is more learners study for assessed qualifications in Welsh as a subject and also learn other subjects through the medium of Welsh. There are a number of figures in this particular section of the report. For example, 177 Year 11 and 79 Year 13 pupils studied Key Stage 4 and 5 through the medium of Welsh during the reporting year. And there are other figures within there, such as 13 pupils sat Welsh First Language A-level exams, 9 pupils sat Welsh Second Language A-level exams. These results are obviously a benchmark as part of our report as our WESP develops, and we'll be monitoring those as part of our Year 2 reports and all future reports going forward. Outcome 5 is more opportunities for learners to use Welsh in different contexts in schools. All our schools are engaged with the Start Iaith or Start Iaith Cymraeg campus schemes in order to support this. And during the reporting year, 34 schools had received an award at the time the report was submitted. We are already aware that this number is increasing during this academic year, and obviously we'll report that at the end of the reporting year. There is also details of Start Iaith Cymraeg Campus Bronze Awards and the Silver Award, and we're also aware of schools that have progressed through that process this academic year also. So it is an area of challenge, but it's an area that certainly schools are engaging with at the moment. Outcome 6, an increase in the provision of Welsh medium education for pupils with additional learning needs, in particular reference to the new Act. The report advised that there's a risk that insufficient staff to deliver a fully bilingual service would create a lack of parity of provision across the service and a failure to meet both the requirements of legislation and the needs for our learners. This is especially relevant in light of the additional growth in additional learning needs and the specialist nature of the staff that we require to do that. The percentage of learners in Welsh medium primary schools identified as having ALN in 2023 was 5.5% compared to 9.6% across all primary schools. In 2022, the percentage of learners in Welsh medium primary schools identified as having ALN was 4.5% compared to 9.3% across all mainstream primary schools. This indicates a growth in pupils identified as having ALN across all primary schools since 22. However, it's noted there's a higher percentage increase in Welsh medium primary schools, which is obviously being explored by colleagues. Outcome 7, increase the number of Welsh teaching staff, Welsh medium teaching staff, as a who are able to teach Welsh as a subject and also to teach through the medium of Welsh. This is particularly challenging, as we are aware. You know, there are recruitment challenges across schools generally, but it's specifically and particularly challenging in Welsh medium. As part of Year 2 actions, we're looking to identify the number of vacancies in councils by school type and determine how many additional teachers we would need in order to reach our WESP targets. We're also working with neighbouring authorities and others to address this challenge and look at if there can be any lessons learned from approaches elsewhere. Although we do recognise not only is this key to the success for the WESP, it is a significant challenge for us. And a working group has been established to look at this. On that note, this report, I've basically summarised the full detail of the report, but I wanted to draw to the attention to Scrutiny to the fact that we now have a Welsh education officer who is working on this, and we are already seeing the benefits of having somebody specifically driving this forward, as it was a significant resource issue in previous years. He is on the call tonight as well, so I'm sure he'll help me with any questions if I'm unable to cover them. His name is Jeremy Morgan. That's it from me, but Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you for that, Lisa. So over to councillors and committee members if there are any thoughts or comments or questions. Councillor Hodges.
Thank you for the report. It's an ongoing markup of the WESP year on year. I note too, I mean, you highlighted the need to move to the 24% target by 2031-32. And I note as well that we're looking at Welsh medium throughout the entire range of school age, and the progress towards moving the Ysgol Bro from 1361 up to 1660. I was just wondering if, as part of the review for the future, how advanced is the thinking towards a second Welsh medium secondary school in the Vale?
Paula Ham referred earlier to a report that is going to be going to Cabinet in terms of aspirations for future developments of the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme. And one of the things we are looking at is opportunities to develop further Welsh medium, including secondary Welsh medium. So that obviously that would be subject to funding and proposals and consultations, etc. But it is something that is certainly on our radar for the next 9 years.
Thank you.
Councillor agreement to Cabinet, obviously.
Councillor Marshalsea.
Hi, thank you, Lisa. I have 2 children in Welsh medium in St Barrack, and I've just got to say what an amazing school it is. The head is doing a fantastic job. And from chatting to her, I think they will be full within a few years, which is really promising and really exciting. Probably need another school, though, I'm afraid, Lisa.
Well, we're up to the challenge.
Great. I've also heard amazing things about the immersion unit as well, and how it's really changed children's use of the language, that they're so confident now. Just so my son's friends came straight into year 1 following the immersion unit, really settled, really comfortable, and I've only heard positive. So thank you as well. My question basically is around ALM provision. What ALM provision is provided for children with ALN that aren't necessarily in mainstream school within the Welsh language?
I'm aware that Liz is on the call and this is her specialist area,
Okay,
but
sorry.
I'm not sure if she's happy to join. I mean, we are looking at opportunities to develop Welsh medium SRB units to address things like autism, and it is a development area for us. As I mentioned, it is part of it was highlighted in year one, and it is part of our action plan for this year. I can see Liz has got her hand up though. I'm sure she can elaborate much better than I can on that.
Thank you, Lisa. We already have a Welsh medium provision that's been open as a pilot. We will be bringing this to scrutiny for further consideration to make that a permanent arrangement. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
I was just going to point out that it was actually one of the pressures that was awarded in the draft budget report. And as Lisa said, we'll be bringing a report to Cabinet very soon to consult on that proposal to establish the unit permanently at Gwaun
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that. Lisa, I'm interested in parental choice here in terms of education point of view. And that one of the things is I'd be interested to know the parents that don't choose Welsh language provision because of the ALN issue. I don't know if there's any consideration been given to that about parental choice. What would their school of choice be if they've got an ALN child? So I don't know if any work's been done on that.
The short answer is that's work in progress. We are during this year, one of our focuses is always challenging to look at ways to engage parents who may not have thought of Welsh medium or may have concerns about Welsh medium, and particularly if they don't speak Welsh themselves, and there's challenges in that. And obviously, ALN would be a factor in their choice. As we just mentioned in the previous question, ALN in primary is lower actually in Welsh medium than it is in English medium at the moment, although it is rising. There are ALN specialists who teach the Welsh medium in all of our primary schools. So I guess it's getting the message out to those parents that that they can get support whichever their medium of choice is. Parental choice is challenging, and when there's capacity, as there currently is at reception level, parents will choose, the medium that they feel more comfortable with. So it is a huge challenge for our WESC, to be honest with you. I can see Trevor's also got his hand up, so I don't know whether he wants to pick up on that.
Yeah, it was just to make reference. So in the past, we've been able to access some grant funding to get Welsh language educators into YYD. So to help those pupils who are in our special school access some of the support through the medium of Welsh. That's been really, really successful and really welcomed. The challenge we have is accessing the workforce. It's difficult getting teachers. It's really difficult getting Welsh teachers, and it's super difficult getting Welsh teachers who are specialists in any kind of ALN provision. So there's a lot of work that we're doing regionally to try and grow the workforce, but that's something that takes years, if not decades, to upskill people to do that. So it isn't where we want it to be in terms of having parity across access in ALN and Welsh language, but there's certainly a lot of work that's happening across schools, as Lisa mentioned, and in YYD as well.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. And just from me, linked to what Trevor was talking about there, on page 35, it says, the council will take steps from this autumn with the aim to identify the number of vacancies in the council by school type, primary, secondary, special, to determine how many additional teachers we will need over the next 5 years to meet plans to increase the number of children in Welsh language education. I was just wondering if there was a time scale on looking into that, on those projections.
Again, this is going to be a long-term project. There Jeremy, you're welcome to join in at this point, because I know you've been involved in, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you wanted to introduce yourself and advise on some of the work that you've been doing in this particular area, because I know this is a key driver for you, isn't it?
Yeah, there you go. Jeremy can just press the activation button. Bottom centre.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you and see you.
Yeah, okay. All right, look, to give you a bit of background in terms of myself, I started in my dedicated role as the Council's Wealth Education Officer last September. So as part of my role, the autumn provided me an opportunity to review how we work within learning and skills supporting the development of Welsh medium education in the Vale. The review included starting to map and audit provision and plan our way forward, implementing working groups and action plans to respond to our duties in relation to the WESP. During this time, I've had a number of meetings, or many meetings, this academic year to discuss Welsh medium provision in the Vale with head teachers, officers and teams internally, plus with external partners locally and regionally. These will continue with the aim to build and strengthen sort of relationships. Now, the areas that we're talking about here, sort of the working groups, they support the 7 outcomes. So we've got 6 working groups, and we have an individual working group sort of to focus on outcome 6, which is around ALN. And outcome 7, what you're just talking about then, which is about teachers, increasing the number of teachers to be able to teach Welsh. That is a key area which we are working on regionally with colleagues to try to identify ways to respond to the challenges that we are facing with recruitment, with plugging the gaps, with attracting staff, because we're noticing that right from head teachers, senior leaders, through to LSAs, through staff in early years and childcare, that we are facing sort of recruitment challenges in those areas. So it is work in progress. I'd like to think that we'll be able to develop and feed back to you a little bit more by the next report. Welsh Government, just before Christmas, did provide more guidance in terms of their expectation and around the data that they want from us and all local authorities around staffing and sort of gaps within the workforce within Welsh medium education.
Great. Thank you for that, Jeremy. Okay. If there's no other speakers on the committee, thank you, Lisa and Jeremy, for that presentation. Really interesting. I move that we note the contents of the annual review report and the feedback received by Welsh Government in terms of the long-term commitment to the Welsh in Education Strategic Plan. Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. And that brings us to the end of Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm only being cheeky because it's not on there, but I notice there's no forward work programme or timetable for subjects or anything like that. So I was just going to take the opportunity to ask about a specific thing. And I was just wondering when we will have a progress or report back on the alternative panels in our schools under assessment. And I was just wondering when that would be possible. Thank you.
I don't have that to hand, but I'm happy to look into it and drop you an email if that's all right. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for their attendance and participation, and good night and see you next time. Thank you.
Good night.